Steve Harvey stopped the show when a homeless man told his story, and what he did next shocked everyone. This isn't just another heartwarming TV moment. It's the story of how one man's courage changed lives forever. In just minutes, you'll witness a transformation so powerful it left an entire audience speechless. A chance encounter that proves sometimes the most profound moments happen when we least expect them. Stay with us as we reveal the moment that changed everything. The studio lights blazed as the audience settled into their seats, the electric atmosphere of the Steve Harvey show filling the room with anticipation. Colorful spotlights danced across the stage while camera operators positioned themselves strategically to capture every emotion. The familiar theme music faded, its final notes hanging in the air as Steve's charismatic presence commanded attention. He stepped center stage with that signature smile, warm, inviting, and genuine. The same smile that had made him a household name across America. This was supposed to be just another episode filled with laughter and entertainment. But fate had other plans for everyone in that studio today. Today, we have someone very special, Steve announced, his voice carrying a weight the audience hadn't heard before. There was something different in his tone, a gravity that made everyone lean forward in their seats. The camera panned slowly to the side of the stage, where a man stood waiting, half hidden in the shadows. Unlike the usual well-dressed guests with their camera-ready appearances, this man wore weathered clothes, a faded gray jacket with frayed cuffs, jeans that had seen better days, and boots worn thin from miles of walking. His posture betrayed his nervousness, shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying an invisible burden that had become part of him. James wasn't meant to be here. A homeless man about to face millions of viewers, to have his life story broadcast into living rooms across the country. His hands trembled visibly as he clutched a small, folded piece of paper, creased and refolded countless times. This wasn't just his notes. It was his lifeline in this moment of terrifying vulnerability, a talisman against the overwhelming sensation of standing before so many judging eyes. A production assistant gave him a gentle nod of encouragement, but it did little to calm the rapid beating of his heart that felt loud enough for the microphones to pick up. As James stepped into the spotlight, the studio fell silent. The usual background murmurs and shifting of the audience ceased completely. Even the typically restless camera operators stood motionless behind their equipment. "I never thought I'd be here," he began, his voice barely audible at first, cracking slightly with emotion. He cleared his throat and tried again, this time with more strength. But something in his tone, raw authenticity that couldn't be rehearsed or manufactured, captured everyone's attention more effectively than any polished speaker could have managed. The nervous energy that had surrounded him transformed into something powerful as he looked up, finally meeting the audience's gaze directly. His eyes, deep brown and lined with the weathering of outdoor life, held a surprising clarity and intelligence. "But I have a story that needs to be told," he continued, his voice finding its rhythm now. "Not just for me, but for thousands of others who never get this chance." In that moment, the barrier between homeless man and audience dissolved, replaced by a human connection that vibrated through the studio like an electric current. Steve Harvey himself stood transfixed, his usual quick comebacks and smooth transitions momentarily forgotten as he watched James command the stage through nothing but honest vulnerability. But as James took a deep breath to continue, adjusting his stance and squaring his shoulders with newfound confidence, nobody could have predicted how his next words would bring the entire show to a standstill. The production team, who had seen everything in their years of television, exchanged glances. Something extraordinary was unfolding before them, something that transcended the usual entertainment formula and touched on something profoundly human. The air in the studio seemed to thicken with anticipation as James prepared to reveal the journey that had brought him from the shadows of society into this blinding spotlight. James's voice strengthened as he began to reveal the story that had brought him to this pivotal moment on stage. Born into a middle-class family in Cincinnati, he had once lived the American dream, complete with a college education, a promising career in finance, and a beautiful wife named Sarah. The couple had even welcomed twin daughters into their lives, who quickly became the center of his universe. Family photos appeared on the large screen behind him, showcasing snapshots of a smiling man in a tailored suit, arms wrapped around his daughters at their 5th birthday party, and moments filled with joy. Moments that seemed unrecognizable from the person who stood on stage now, a man marked by hardship. 3 years ago, everything changed, James explained, his voice momentarily faltering as he recalled the painful memories. The sudden economic downturn had coincided with Sarah's devastating cancer diagnosis. The once stable household was rocked to its core as James struggled to balance work responsibilities with caring for his wife. Medical bills mounted with relentless speed, and as his company began downsizing, security slipped through his fingers like sand. Within 8 months, the unthinkable happened. He lost everything: his wife to cancer, his home to foreclosure, and ultimately, his grip on stability and hope. "I slept in my car at first," he continued, his tone resolute but laced with sorrow. "I told myself it was temporary, just a bump in the road. Then the car got repossessed." The audience sat in stunned silence as James described the harrowing nights spent under highway overpasses, the gnawing hunger that became his constant companion, and the overwhelming shame that kept him from reaching out to former colleagues or friends who could help. The system, he lamented, seemed designed to keep him trapped, offering no easy escape for someone who had once been a respected member of society. Most painful of all was the distance from his daughters, now 8 years old, who believed their father was away working. He spoke of the heart-wrenching moments when he would watch from afar as they played at the park with their grandparents, laughter echoing in the air. A laughter he felt he had no right to join. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And every time I opened them, I was reminded of my failure to protect them, to provide for them." Steve Harvey, visibly moved by the gravity of James's story, stepped closer, breaking the emotional silence that had settled over the studio. "What kept you going through all of this?" he asked softly, his voice filled with compassion. James reached into his pocket and carefully withdrew a worn photograph, protected in plastic, a cherished snapshot of his twin daughters. "I promised Sarah I would find my way back to them," he said, his voice breaking as he held the photo up for the audience to see. "Every day, I apply for jobs. I walk miles to the library to use computers. I've stayed sober, stayed clean. But the world sees only a homeless man. They see my clothes, my unkempt hair, and they turn away without knowing the fight I'm in every single day to get my life back." As he finished speaking, the camera panned across the audience, capturing their reactions. Not a dry eye remained. Some members were openly crying, while others looked on in disbelief, absorbing the weight of James's narrative. Steve Harvey stood silent for what felt like an eternity, his own composure barely intact. The raw truth of James's story had stripped away the usual entertainment veneer, leaving only humanity in its wake. The production team, who had initially planned to cut to commercial, held back, recognizing that something truly authentic was unfolding. The atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. What began as a typical episode had morphed into a powerful moment of connection and empathy that resonated deeply with everyone present. Then, in the midst of this emotional whirlwind, Steve's voice broke the silence. "James, you've shown incredible strength just by being here and sharing your story. But I want to know what you envision for the future. What do you hope for now?" James took a deep breath, his eyes glistening with tears, but now filled with determination. "I want my daughters back," he said firmly. "I want to show them that no matter how far down we go, there's always a way back up. I want to teach them resilience, to show them that life can knock us down, but we can rise again. I want them to know that their father is still fighting for them, and that I will do whatever it takes to be the man they can be proud of." As James spoke these words, the energy in the room shifted again. The audience could feel the weight of his resolve, and a collective sense of hope began to blossom in the air. The realization dawned on everyone. This moment was not just about a man sharing his struggles. It was about the power of perseverance, the human spirit's ability to rise from despair, and the profound impact of community and connection. What happened next would not only transform James's life, but would also ripple through the lives of everyone who witnessed this moment of extraordinary connection between two men from vastly different worlds. The stage was set for something remarkable. A chance for James to reclaim his life, and for the audience to participate in a story that was far from over. The atmosphere in the studio was electric, a palpable mix of hope and determination as James stood before the audience, his heart racing with the weight of his aspirations. Steve Harvey, inspired by the depth of James's story, leaned in closer, ready to take action. "You've shared so much with us today, James. It's time we do something about it," he said, his voice resonating with conviction. The audience erupted into applause, a wave of support washing over James like a warm embrace. In that moment, he felt the strength of the community surrounding him, igniting a flicker of hope in his heart. But what could possibly come next? The journey he had embarked upon was fraught with uncertainty. Every day was a battle for survival. Yet, the energy in the room suggested that perhaps change was within reach. "Let's talk about what you need, James. What is it that could help you get back on your feet?" Steve asked, his eyes locked onto James with a sincerity that made him feel seen for the first time in a long while. James hesitated, the enormity of the question weighing heavily on him. "I need a job. I need a place to stay. But most of all, I need to be able to see my daughters again," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to provide for them, to show them that I'm still their dad, that I'm fighting for them." The audience listened intently, their expressions a blend of empathy and determination. Steve nodded, acknowledging the power of those words. "You're not alone in this, James. We're all in this together. You've inspired so many people today, and I believe we can help you make this happen." With that, Steve turned to the audience, a fire igniting in his eyes. "Who here is willing to help James? We need to rally together as a community. Let's see what we can do to lift him up." The response was immediate. Hands shot up all around the studio. People were eager to contribute, to offer support in any way they could. One woman stood up, tears streaming down her face. "I have a job opening at my company. It's not much, but it's a start. I'd like to offer you an interview, James." The audience erupted in applause, and James felt his heart swell with gratitude. Another man stood, his voice steady. "I own a local construction business. We're always looking for reliable workers. I can guarantee you a job if you want it." More applause followed, and James felt the warmth of hope wrapping around him like a blanket. As the offers continued to pour in, Steve turned his attention back to James. "This is just the beginning. We'll help you find a place to live, and I want to make sure you have access to resources to get back on your feet. You've shown us your strength. Now let us show you ours." James stood in awe, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. He had entered the studio feeling like a man at the end of his rope. But now he felt the threads of hope weaving back into his life. "Thank you, everyone. I can't express how much this means to me. You're giving me a chance to be the father I want to be again," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Steve moved closer, placing a hand on James's shoulder. "We're going to make this happen. You're not just going to survive, you're going to thrive." The audience erupted into cheers, and for the first time in a long while, James allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, he could find his way back. As the show continued, James shared more about his life, his hopes and dreams, while the audience remained engaged, offering words of encouragement and support. He spoke about the little things he missed most: baking cookies with his daughters, reading bedtime stories, and simply being present in their lives. With every word, he painted a picture of the man he once was and the father he longed to be again. The segment culminated in a powerful moment when Steve announced a special surprise for James and his family. "We've teamed up with local organizations to provide you with a fully furnished apartment and all the essentials you need to start fresh," he declared. The audience cheered loudly, and James felt tears of gratitude welling in his eyes. "Plus," Steve continued, "we're setting up a scholarship fund for your daughters to ensure they have the educational opportunities they deserve. They will never have to worry about their future." James could hardly process the weight of these promises. It was as if a dream was unfolding before him, one he had thought was lost forever. As the final applause echoed through the studio, James looked around at the faces of the audience members, strangers who had become allies in his fight for a better life. The warmth of their support enveloped him, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he felt a glimmer of hope shining brightly in his heart. The show concluded, but James's journey was far from over. He had taken the first steps toward reclaiming his life, and the love and support of a community would guide him along the way. As he left the stage, he held his head high, ready to embrace the challenges ahead, and determined to reunite with his daughters, armed with the strength of a united community behind him. 3 months had passed since James's appearance on the Steve Harvey Show. The autumn leaves were turning golden as he stood outside a modest but well-maintained apartment building, nervously adjusting his tie. He barely recognized himself in the reflection of the glass door. Clean-shaven, hair neatly trimmed, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks. The weathered homeless man was gone, replaced by someone who resembled the father he once was, though his eyes still carried the wisdom of someone who had journeyed through darkness. The community's response to James's story had been overwhelming, a testament to the power of human connection. The construction company had not only hired him, but had created a position that utilized his financial background, recognizing that his experience in finance could help manage their growing business. His supervisor, Miguel, had taken him under his wing, showing patience during those first difficult weeks when James was adjusting to the structure of work life again. Everyone deserves a second chance, Miguel had told him after James successfully completed his first major project. But not everyone has the courage to make the most of it like you do. His new apartment, though small, was clean and furnished with donations from viewers who had been moved by his story. A local interior designer had volunteered her services, creating a space that felt like a home, complete with 2 small bedrooms, one for him and one with twin beds for when his daughters would visit. On the walls hung framed children's artwork that the show had collected from Emma and Lily over the years, a colorful timeline of their growth that he had missed. A local therapist, Dr. Hernandez, had offered free counseling sessions to help him process his grief and trauma. Those weekly meetings had become a lifeline, a safe space where James could voice his fears about fatherhood and his lingering guilt over Sarah's death. Healing isn't linear, Dr. Hernandez would remind him. Some days will be harder than others, but each step forward counts, no matter how small. Most importantly, Sarah's parents had agreed to a reunion with his daughters after witnessing his transformation. The process had been delicate, with several preliminary meetings between James and his in-laws before they felt comfortable introducing him back into the girls' lives. Margaret, Sarah's mother, had been the first to extend an olive branch. "Sarah always believed in you," she had told him during their first tense coffee meeting. "Maybe it's time we honor her faith." Now, standing at the threshold of this momentous reunion, James took a deep breath to steady himself. The weight of the moment pressed on him. Excitement and terror intermingled in his chest. He had rehearsed what to say countless times, but all his prepared words seemed inadequate for the occasion. "You can do this," James whispered to himself, clutching a small gift bag containing 2 identical stuffed bears, replacements for the ones his daughters had when they were younger. The original bears, named Honey and Sugar, had been left behind during the foreclosure, another casualty of their family's collapse. He had searched online for weeks to find exact replicas, a small gesture he hoped might bridge the gap between their past and present. His heart pounded as he pressed the doorbell to his in-laws' home. The chime echoed, followed by the sound of small running feet and excited voices. James could hear Margaret's gentle admonishment, "Walk, girls, don't run," and Robert's deeper tone asking them to give everyone space. The familiar domestic sounds nearly brought him to his knees. They were so ordinary, yet so precious to him now. The door swung open, and there stood Margaret and Robert, his former in-laws, their expressions a mixture of caution and hope. Margaret's hair had more gray than he remembered, and Robert seemed to have aged years in the time they'd been apart. Behind them, partially hidden, were Emma and Lily, now 8 years old, their eyes wide with uncertainty. For a moment, no one spoke. The girls had grown so much, their faces thinner, more defined, looking so much like Sarah that James felt his breath catch. Emma still had the small birthmark near her hairline, and Lily's eyes still crinkled at the corners when she was nervous, just like they were doing now. "Daddy?" Emma whispered, taking a tentative step forward. She was wearing a blue dress with butterflies, her hair in neat braids. Lily hung back, clutching her grandmother's hand, her expression more guarded. James knelt down, bringing himself to their eye level, his heart hammering in his chest. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me." His voice cracked on the last word, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. The silence shattered as Emma rushed forward, colliding with him in a tangle of arms and tears. James enveloped her in his embrace, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her small body trembling against his. After a moment's hesitation, Lily broke away from Margaret and joined them, her initial reserve melting into desperate need. "I missed you so much," James managed to say through his tears. "Every single day. Not one day went by that I didn't think about you both." "We saw you on TV," Lily murmured into his shoulder. "You look so sad." "I was sad," James admitted, pulling back slightly to look at their faces. "Being away from you was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Margaret wiped tears from her eyes as she watched the reunion. "They never stopped asking about you," she said softly. "We kept your photos everywhere, told them stories about you. We wanted them to know who their father was." Robert, still standing in the doorway, cleared his throat. "Why don't we all go inside? There's hot chocolate and the girls made cookies for you, James." His tone was measured, still protective, but the invitation was genuine. Inside, the house was just as James remembered. The same comfortable furniture, the same family photos on the walls, though new ones had been added of the girls' school events and birthdays. In the living room, a shrine of sorts had been created. Photos of Sarah throughout her life, including their wedding day and the day the twins were born. James paused before these images, touching Sarah's face gently through the glass. "We talk to Mom sometimes," Emma said, slipping her small hand into his. "Grandma says she can hear us from heaven." "I think she can," James replied, his throat tight. "And I bet she's so proud of how brave and strong you both are." Over cookies and milk, James listened as the twins excitedly shared stories about school, friends, and their lives. Emma was taking piano lessons and proudly demonstrated her skills on the upright piano in the corner. Lily showed him her collection of rocks and minerals, explaining each one with scientific precision. They showed him art projects, told him jokes, and competed for his attention as if making up for lost time. James absorbed every word, every gesture, storing them away like precious treasures. "Do you remember how you used to read us stories?" Lily asked, her eyes hopeful. "With all the different voices?" "I do," James said, smiling at the memory. "I was pretty good at the Three Bears, wasn't I?" "Daddy Bear was the best," Emma giggled. "You would growl so loud it scared us, but in a fun way." As the afternoon progressed, James presented them with the stuffed bears. "I know they're not exactly the same as Honey and Sugar," he said apologetically, "but I thought maybe they could be Honey and Sugar's cousins." The girls examined the bears with solemn concentration before hugging them close. "They're perfect," Lily declared, and Emma nodded in agreement. They needed a family, too. Later, as the girls played in the next room, James sat with Margaret and Robert at the kitchen table. The atmosphere was more subdued, adult concerns replacing the uncomplicated joy of the children's reunion. "I can never thank you enough for taking care of them," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You kept them safe when I couldn't. You gave them stability when everything was falling apart." Margaret reached across and squeezed his hand. "They're our flesh and blood too, James. We did what any grandparents would do." Robert, who had been the most hesitant about the reunion, studied James carefully. "The girls need consistency," he said finally. "They've been through enough upheaval. If you're back in their lives, it has to be for good. No disappearing when things get tough." "I understand," James nodded, meeting Robert's gaze steadily. "I'm not the same man I was. What I went through, it changed me. I know now what matters, and I know what I'm willing to fight for." Robert seemed to find what he was looking for in James's expression. He reached across the table and placed his hand over James's. "Sarah would be proud of you for finding your way back," he said, his voice softening. "We all lost her, but these girls deserve to have their father. They need you, James. They always have." The conversation turned to the future. Weekend visits at first, then perhaps more time together as everyone adjusted. They discussed practical matters, the girls' school schedules, their extracurricular activities, their medical needs. James took notes, determined not to miss a single detail. They talked about holidays and birthdays, creating a framework for their new family dynamic. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it was clear. "I've been saving," James told them. "My new job pays well, and I've been putting aside money each month. I want to be able to contribute to their expenses, maybe help with their college funds." Margaret smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "That sounds just like the James we used to know, always planning ahead." As evening approached, James prepared to leave, promising to return the following weekend. The girls clung to him at the door, reluctant to let go. "Will you really come back?" Lily asked, her small face serious, a shadow of doubt crossing her features. James knelt down again, looking into her eyes. Sarah's eyes, with that same questioning intelligence. "Nothing could keep me away," he promised. "Not ever again. And you know what? I'm going to give you my phone number, and you can call me anytime you want, day or night, just to talk, or if you have a question, or even if you just want to say hi." "Every day?" Emma asked, her expression brightening. "Every single day if you want," James confirmed, pulling them both into another hug. "I have 3 years of hugs to make up for." As he finally stepped away, Robert surprised him by pulling him into a brief, firm embrace. "She would be happy about this," he murmured, so only James could hear. Sarah always believed in second chances. Walking back to his apartment in the gathering dusk, James felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The cool evening air carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance, children were laughing. The journey from that desperate man on Steve Harvey's stage to this moment had been arduous, filled with hard work, tears, and determination. But with each step forward, he carried the knowledge that he was no longer alone. He passed a playground where parents watched their children climb and swing, a scene that would have once filled him with unbearable pain. Now, he could imagine bringing Emma and Lily here, pushing them on the swings, catching them at the bottom of the slide. The future stretched before him, not perfect but full of possibility. That night, as he prepared for his early morning shift, James placed a new photo on his bedside table. One taken that very day of him with his daughters, their faces pressed together, smiling. The joy in their expressions was unmistakable, a testament to the resilience of children and their capacity for forgiveness. Beside it sat the worn photo he had carried throughout his homelessness, a reminder of how far he had come and why he had never given up. He thought about the journey ahead, the parent-teacher conferences, the dance recitals, the skinned knees and homework struggles. There would be challenges, moments when his confidence would falter, times when the weight of his past mistakes would threaten to overwhelm him. But he would face them all, one day at a time, strengthened by the love that had survived against all odds. Outside his window, the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky. Somewhere in that same city, his daughters were falling asleep, perhaps dreaming of their father's return. James made a silent promise to them, to Sarah, and to himself. This was just the beginning of their new story together, one of healing, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of family that even the darkest times couldn't sever. As he drifted off to sleep, James felt Sarah's presence, as if she were watching over all of them. "I made it back," he whispered into the darkness. "Just like I promised. And I'm never leaving again."